We are very keen to get audience participation, but of course, I'm monitoring the YouTube chat as well as the Zoom chat. Our main audience is, in fact, on YouTube, so I will be very, very keen to see, everyone who joins. Our first session is going to really look at the combination of risk management in construction. And our second one will look at the connection between financial risk management and the leader of the future. We're going to be starting in 2 minutes with our first fantastic panelist. One of the things that I am very keen to do is to expand on our Align event series, because Align seeks to combine not just the cyber and the physical side, but also other stakeholders. For example, in London, we just had fraud. We also had project management office, project controls, financial risk, things that traditionally do not sit well together. One of the very important things we've noticed is that we have pivoted away from the world of risk management in just a security space. And we've also said that perhaps the term convergence isn't where we are trying to focus the series. What we'd really like to do is to encourage our attendees to look at ways in which you can align with other functions rather than become them. I'm just waiting for our first fantastic panelist. And as I say, please do, pop your questions in the chat as we come through. And one thing that we're very keen to do is do these series on time zone basis. And you'll notice by my changed demeanor that I'm actually unaccustomed to doing a live stream like this. So for me, this is, of course, also a learning experience, because many of you will see that we do things primarily on Zoom webinar, but enough demand has come through to make sure that we do everything, including YouTube. Our first panelist, Aurora Ayala, was until recently Associate Vice Chancellor for Facilities, Risk Management and Operations at San Diego Community College. But we are going to bring her up to the stage now as herself. Just to clarify, it is Aurora coming as herself. Hello, Aurora. Welcome to the Mega Projects Risk Management Forum. We are live streaming, and we are very pleased to have you on. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And it's a slightly new format for me, but many people have really, told me that they really value the YouTube live stream. So this is a new format for me, but I am eager to help people through the process. So I'm monitoring all of the chat over there, but it's really nice to include you. Traditionally, our conferences in the UK or in the States have looked at the world of corporate security modernization, and we have looked at traditional stakeholders when it comes to security and risk management. Not that you're not completely traditional, but it'd be good to give a flavor of your background and what sort of things you've been working on in recent years.
Well, first of all, excited to do this. And definitely a new platform for me. I'm doing it live, so excuse any mistakes I make along the way. But I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Based out of San Diego, I have a combination of the private and the public sector when it comes to facilities management and construction management. Recently, I served as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Facilities, Risk Management, and Operations at San Diego Community College. And previous to that, I was a Director of Facilities for Southwestern Community College. And then, going back a little bit further, a little bit more history on that, I was on the private sector. So facilities management for aerospace and technology. So I've had a little bit, I've dabbled a little bit in everything so far.
Well, that's a very varied career so far, and it's good because it fits into our aligned theme for the event. One of the things that many stakeholders have said is that they wish they could have gotten involved in a project at the ground level, or every time they try to get involved with risk management, a budget is set, or a plan is arranged, or the project management office has sorted everything out. I'd be interested, maybe in a first principles question, where do you see risk management actually starting on a major construction program?
Um, well, it's interesting how you're laying out the question because you mentioned about stakeholders, but this depending on whether it's private or public, risk management actually begins with really the concept, like whether it is you're realizing that we're spending too much money on repairing a building. At that point, we should really be looking at rebuilding. Um, I apologize for that. That's consequences of live streaming. Uh, or in the private sector, sometimes the risk actually starts when you're starting to realize that you're potentially putting the stakeholders at risk by constantly putting a band-aid versus doing a full new build. Um, I can tell you that from a facilities perspective, I already start to see risk when we're constantly just throwing money on repairs. And I already start raising red flags to my leadership when we're constantly repairing and repairing, where at that point we should be looking at really doing a demolition and doing a new build because our stakeholders are sometimes the students and they can't continue to have disruption while they're trying to take a final.
Mm.
Our stakeholders can literally be community members that are counting on our campuses to do their events, seminars, conferences, and it really hinders the experience when we have a leaking ceiling, when we have a major sewage backup. So that's where the risk starts.
And would you say that many people kind of equate risk purely in terms of security or reactive risk management? What do they get wrong, or what are their preconceptions?
Yeah, most people when they hear risk, like risk management, I think a lot of they start to think about workers' comp. They start to think about that kind of risk, or the risk of being sued. Like when you're hearing risk, even when I get questions sent to me, hey, from a risk management perspective, what should we do? But there's so much. You're right. There's so much more to risk management and risk mitigation during design. One of the things that we're always looking at, and that sometimes has a little bit of oversight during design, is the security aspect. Where do you put the cameras? Or do we have blind spots? And if we have a potential blind spot that's coming up in a design, or already whether we're doing a renovation, uh, should we put sensors? Where do we put the motion sensor lights that especially in the public sector, funds are very limited. They're not so limited on the construction side, which is, a lot of people don't understand that, but they are very limited on the operational budget. So putting all the money up front that can help reduce your operational expenses, therefore reducing your risk, really make a major impact.
And that sort of front loading, I think, is key, and it's what we're trying to advocate. You know, what what do you think the project management sees risk, as? Do you think they see it as just an inhibitor to getting the job done? What do they underestimate most consistently?
I would say from working with a lot of our construction partners, I think they see construction risk management tied into construction management and how it affects them. How how can they control safety within the fence line? Like that's what I think that, I start to see when they're asking about risk. A lot of our construction managers, partners, and I'm talking about some pretty large firms here, they see their responsibility just from the fence line in, from their limits of work, it's the terminology for where they're responsible for. But from an owner's perspective, we see risk inside the fence line, outside the fence line, where your contractors are going to be parking. For us, it's the full picture. Even just the coordination, sometimes we have two projects happening in one live campus. And we're not just seeing their project, we're seeing both projects, we're seeing all the events that happen with the community. So I would hope that one of the things that our construction partners start to get better at is, even though it may not be their responsibility, they should be mindful of how their project affects the campus. If there is another project happening at the same time, it doesn't always have to be $100 million project. It can be as simple as a sewer line replacement that we're running through a campus. For them to be mindful of the full scope of work that the owner has on whatever parcel they're working on.
And have you found many projects that, on the larger size to be receptive to your input, or is there generally a sense of no, don't bring that to my attention now, things will be at risk of slipping, or have you found them actually very receptive to say yes, actually just include it all on the ground level?
I think it's receptive because we're the owners, so we're the ones paying. So it's receptive because you kind of have to be receptive. But the frustration part is that we're paying a lot of money for you to be the subject matter expert, not for us to be the subject matter expert. And if you know you're going to have low voltage coming in, and we're going to be replacing it in an intrusion system that is usually tied into a police department. I mean, we're talking about large facilities here, so not a standalone. You should be looking past your fence line. You should be already doing your investigative work. And if the owner, which is us, if we don't have any of that up front, and this project is going to have it, be the subject matter expert. Tell us. Because once we start telling you, or once we're already in damage control because you've cut some lines, or it's sometimes it's called scope gap because we don't have it. But when we hire subject matter experts, we want them to tell us what we don't know. So if we're telling you, yes, they're going to receive it well, but they're also going to be receiving it well because we're the owners. They're going to be receiving it well because we are now going to have to pay for a change order. It's very frustrating. It actually starts to add a little bit of a sour relationship as the project starts to move along, that we're having to now pay for a change order that had they been a little bit better partners, they could have, it's almost like have this quality control checklist up front, everything that we should know. And if we don't know, tell us that what we don't know, so we can start preparing for that financially.
And a question came in on the stream. It said, does it depend on the sector? Government is very different to the private sector.
I don't think so. I don't think it depends on the sector. The difference is that when it's a public sector, you have public contracting code that you have to follow for every single process. But a contract is a contract. And by the time you've already entered into a construction relationship, we more than likely already have a contract in place. So no, it doesn't change. What does help us is during pre-construction, and we have, it really matters that we have a close relationship with the architect. I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but the delivery method also matters of construction. But I would say no, because I've done both, and we always seem to find it being the same issue, that we own the responsibility because we're the owners. but you're the subject matter expert that we hired. It would have been good for you to have told us, we're seeing a big gap in data that you're giving us. We don't have the plans that we need. You need to start preparing for some contingencies here because this is going to be costly. It allows us to prepare it, and you put us on notice from the beginning that we might have some expenses that we did not plan for, which is the contingency.
And I guess, what in your opinion has been the most frequent showstopper? I know it's quite a general, question, like how long is a piece of string, but has there been something that repeatedly has been showstopper or problem? It just keeps on reoccurring regardless of size or budget.
Mhm. So that's where it does make a little bit of a difference between the public and the private. In the private sector, you tend to have leadership that sticks around a little longer for years. So when you start the planning and programming of a design, and I'm going to talk about large constructions because those usually take 3 to 5 years versus a renovation. You might not have the same vice president or president that has the authority over that design when that project is being closed out. And in the private sector, you usually have a little bit more consistency there on who is making the decisions. So it brings me back to the question of the showstopper. The client tends to be a little bit of a bottleneck. And in the public sector, we have a lot of layers sometimes of authority, and that delays. So, and depending on how the leadership is set up, but we've tried to establish some standard operating practices of authority for signatures. So if you're out in the field, then you need to make a decision and you don't want to wait for a formal change order to go all the way through the signature process. We try to create a system that if you're out in the field and it's detrimental to the project and it's detrimental, whether it's schedule or financial, any decision is to be made, that we are able to, whether it's the director of facilities or the project manager, is able to make it with the text message and then it's followed up with an email. And we do it by tiers of value. Like, what is the risk? It's very low risk if it's under 25,000. It's very low risk if it, it depends. And I've tried to do it where it's under 100,000. I usually have leadership that really trust my judgment, so they know that if I'm making a field decision, it's because it's the most important. And I still keep them engaged via text, and then we'll go through the formal process. But if you don't have those processes in place, the owner, we are the bottleneck. We start to create delays. We start to what something that should have been resolved between one meeting and another, it just gets carried on and carried on.
And so does that mean that you're the person left trying to almost resolve tensions between contractor risk appetite? I know you're the customer, but the contractor's risk appetite and the institutions, like, do you see yourself as having been that person in the middle, and who usually wins?
Myself personally, I'm not always in the middle because we hire a project management or construction management partner to manage our projects. And I've usually sat with them in the same building, same office. And so we do a lot of coordination because we typically have several $100 million projects happen at the same time. So you need to have a firm that's managing the projects, but I'm the client. And so they have to coordinate with us as well. And who usually wins? It depends. It depends on the ambiguity of the contract. I have yet to find a perfect contract, but we try during the planning, during the initial stage, of making sure there is no ambiguity in the design. And if there is, that it's called out, like I mentioned earlier. Because at the beginning, everybody is in the honeymoon stage. Everybody's super excited. We're excited from the owners that we're finally getting this project underway. The contractor's excited that they just got awarded this huge job. The architect's excited, about another job. Everyone's just really excited, and then the real work starts. And all it takes is for a little bit of scope gap. And then I usually push on the contract. I will, whoever our project management firm is, I will ask them, what does the contract say? What do the plans say? What does the project specification say? I go to that. And we try to add as much language as the owner to protect ourselves. That if there is any ambiguity, we will say, we'll throw a disclaimer on there that to go off of industry standards. Who usually wins? We always try to win. From the public sector, we have taxpayers that are counting on us to use the dollars as good stewards, so we have to push hard. So we try to be fair, because if you're not fair, you will ruin a relationship and the reputation gets out, and you're going to have another contractor that is not going to want to work with you, or they will, but now they're going to mark it up because they know that we're going to push back and they need to protect themselves. So I think that's a very long-winded response, but it all depends.
Which is of course, my favorite answer, because it really does depend on many different variables. But I'm interested, in this Align context that I sort of spoke of. What future risks make it onto the risk register? In that, when we talk to, for example, security stakeholders, they say, I wish I would have been consulted at the design phase. I wish you would have thought about the number of cameras initially, or the bollards you might need, right? Do you see that changing, or do you see them still having a hard time making their voice heard at that initial stage?
I see it slowly changing. It's slowly changing. It sounds silly because it should be something that's just part of it, but typically the architectural firms do not have a subject matter expert. They have people that have done this before, and they know where to put the sensors, and they know where, they try to mitigate safety, but they don't always have a subject matter expert that this is what they do. And from the public sector, we rely on our own police department. Like, we usually have our own sworn-in officers in our own police department, and we try to rely on them. Like, we'll have them look at the plans, and we'll ask them, like, where do you want cameras? Where do you want intrusion system? Where do you want sensors? Do we put access control on every door? Or so we ask our police department, but they're also not subject matter experts on security mitigation. And I have found that because we'll ask our officers, our police officers, or our sergeants, but that's not what their specialty is. They just know where they need it, but they don't really know where it should be exactly installed. They'll tell us about the issues that they have, and we try to capture those issues and try to put them into the design. And when you bring in a third party under an architect, or if we hire them directly as a consultant, a third party, it's very difficult to find a company that has the knowledge of everything, and is also being mindful of what it's going to cost for us to maintain it. And that's a very difficult balance to have. For example, we were in a building, and the end user, which was the director, wanted access control on every single door. And in theory, you're like, yeah, why not, right? Less hard keys, you can really control everything. But if we are doing build outs of over 10 buildings and we're going to put access control on every single door, we're now thinking of, now we have to, from the facility side, I have to think, what is this going to cost when construction is done? Can I maintain this? And do I have the staff to be able to troubleshoot this? Or will I always have to go to an outside party? And I want to remind you that our construction funds are one-time funds. They're bond dollars typically. Our operational funds are very limited. And so the terminology is total cost of ownership. I wish that our security partners had a good understanding of total cost of ownership. So when they provided a recommendation, we didn't have to sit there constantly descoping this. They can literally look at the plans and they can ask you, what is your total cost of ownership, owner? And it sounds ridiculous, but sometimes it's only like $20,000. So what actually needs to be monitored? What do you really need? Those are things that aren't, when you talk about risk register, the first risk is, what is your need? What is your operational budget? And then you can see how high is this risk, and do you actually, now where do we need to put the systems that you need? And never offer proprietary in the public sector. In the private sector, you can. In the public sector, it's very difficult for us to have proprietary because we are a shared governance institution. And that means that we have to go to a governing board to ask for a resolution to accept a proprietary item. So just for our security partners out there, that's very difficult for us. And then typically we don't have the staff. We usually have to hire you. It's a unionized environment. So kind of knowing your client and knowing is important. And there's two different risk registers. There's the security companies, internal. Hey, this is our client. Let's see what our risks are, so we can come in with the proposals, or we can come in and offer our services. And then we always have a risk register in the project by default. And not just for security, but for everything. We constantly carry a risk register.
And that's a nice segue into perhaps what we're going to talk with Pratik about next. For example, the world of sustainability, but total cost of ownership. Does that stretch to the world of sustainability too? Because someone says buy this access control system. Oh yes, but it's got a monthly subscription of who knows what in the future. Does that also tie into sustainability goals? Because it might be cheap, but it might not be sustainable. And maybe the city or the county has a different priority.
Absolutely. So our total cost of ownership, and for those that are listening, just to give you just an idea what total cost of ownership means is, what is it going to cost the owner, whether it's public or private, to maintain this new building and everything within it, from security systems to air conditioning systems, even what it's going to cost. I'm going to get down to like granular information. What is going to cost us to clean it? That's total cost of ownership, everything that it costs to maintain this new building. And that is something, I'm usually the person that's in the meeting pushing back and saying, absolutely no, we cannot increase another 20,000 square feet. We can barely clean these 10,000 square feet. We cannot do this. And so that's total cost of ownership, everything that it's going to cost us. And is it sustainable? That's, I kind of answered that, but I'll give you just some examples. In a lot of the new technology, even though it's great and it's making our life easier, it's also requiring for our internal staff that has usually been there for a long time to get trained up, to be able to meet, to be able to either themselves troubleshoot this new technology, or now, and if they can't because they don't have the bandwidth, because it's not sustainable, all this new square footage, then we have to outsource. and outsourcing usually costs us more, and it still hits the same budget. So that's why I'm always looking at what are we installing? If it's going to make our life easier, what kind of maintenance does it require? When it comes to security, our cameras, it's fantastic that we're going to put all these cameras, but usually just have one dispatcher behind 50 monitors. And does it make sense to have all these cameras in place? Do we have the server capacity to do this? So just, and I look at the life of the equipment, I look at the warranty during construction. We try to pay for extended warranty if it's available. It depends on the funding source, but we try as much as possible to be able to cover any upfront costs. If a product was normally going to have a life of 5 years, but we can pay for an upgraded product that has a life of 10 years, we will pay the 10 years just because on our operational budget, we don't have the money to replace it in 5 years. So it's a very difficult balance. I think in the private sector, there's more money there on the operational side, and you're not juggling so much between salaries and operational. You balance it together. In the public sector, and specifically in community colleges, there's a major off balance between salaries and operational budget. So usually it's salaries, operational budgets there's not a direct balance there. But yeah, that's it. It's very difficult. I probably have had the most difficulties being able to sustain what we install.
And so when then does this leave the leader of the future, the FM leader, for example? Because traditionally I've asked questions in a panel such as this, asking about technical and business acumen and so on. But it seems to me that perhaps there's a degree of risk management acumen and sustainability. I don't know. Where do you see this leader of the future evolving to?
You mentioned FM, and if I could evolve with perfect technology to help us, and I was recently trying to do this. It takes human resources to make this happen, and when you're limited on the staff to make this happen, it's very difficult. But a ideal technology would be to have a facilities management. It's CMMS, which is a maintenance management system, a computer maintenance management system that usually manages all your work orders, all your projects, the life of your equipment and trends, usage and deficiencies. It would be perfect for us to have a CMMS system tied into everything that is being installed in construction that requires maintenance, including technology. Because then you can actually start to see trends of usage, trends of repairs. We can really start to see, we're constantly building buildings, so we can start to see, is this equipment, is this technology that we just installed, is it worth it? Or are we finding ourselves having repetitive work orders? And because we don't have that technology, there's technology out there, but we don't have enough resources to be able to maintain it and constantly doing the data dump into it. We're going off of travel knowledge. We're asking our low voltage technicians, what do you guys think? We're asking our electricians, what do you think? And we're going off of opinions versus data. So it's the technology is out there, but unfortunately, we don't have the human resources to be able to provide good data and do good data dump because they're competing against work orders of a failed panel. So it's either they enter data or they go and repair an electrical panel.
That makes sense, and it's a stark choice, but it's good to highlight that, because otherwise people will just skirt over it and say, "Oh, leave that. I don't really care." But no, I think this is good. This is a good window into the modern FM leader and the challenges of risk management. What's next for you? Where can we next find you?
Well, for the first time in my life, I decided to do something that is against my DNA. I am taking a break for about 3 to 4 months. Um, I have decided with my husband to go do some traveling. And so we're actually on a 2 week break. We just came back for 2 weeks of traveling. We're going to be gone for another 3 weeks. And then I'll come back. I really like the public sector. I think I'm good at it. Yeah, I probably will stay there. And we'll see. And there's a lot, and fortunately for us in San Diego, there's a lot of opportunities. So we'll see where the future lands. I'm going to try to stay in the public sector. I love being an advocate for our taxpayers, and I also really enjoy our construction partners. You build relationships, and you get to be able to select the teams. A lot of our technology partners, I like to build stronger relationships with them because they usually get added as a sub to an architect, so we don't actually know who they are. And I would say I know this is a technology webinar, so I would say to a lot of our security technology companies, I would encourage them to go to a lot of construction management association meetings, to conferences where it's construction, because then you get to meet the owners, and the owners get to actually learn about your technology, as opposed to us going to seminars or conferences that are just technology based.
And finding out too late.
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Aurora, thanks very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you. A big virtual round of applause for you, and I'll put you back in the audience. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And yeah, please keep those comments coming. I am monitoring the YouTube chat, and it's exciting to be doing this hybrid format. Let me bring our next fantastic panelist up to the stage, and I'll tell you all about him. We are live at the Mega Projects Risk Management Forum West, and we are very pleased to meet Pratik Srivastava, who is a structural engineer at Stantec with many other hats. How are you doing?
I'm good, Phelan. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm good. It's been a varied combination of topics, and a lot has centered, I suppose, around pre-construction, post-construction, and ongoing costs. And Aurora very kindly, highlighted, the challenge of people thinking, oh, it's all been baked in, when in fact there are ongoing costs of projects. And
Correct.
just at the end there, we kind of were exploring the leader of the future, the balance of skill sets. I'd be interested in adding the sustainability skill set in there as well. But before I do, tell us a bit about your background, your journey, and particularly sustainability is rather interesting.
Sure, yeah. So, as everybody knows, my name is Pratik. I am a structural engineer working for Stantec. I have I have an experience of nearly a decade at this point, worked on infrastructure projects, buildings, bridges, tunnels, and now also data centers. So, and I've also worked in New York City. Now I'm working in San Francisco Bay Area. So that's a little bit of my professional background. Talking about sustainability, I'm very much passionate about sustainability in terms of like how it creates value and how it reduces emissions in the built environment. So I also co-lead the Infrastructure 2050, the Bridge Group, and also I'm contribute to SE 2050, which stands for like it's Structural Engineers 2050, which defines like how we design buildings, bridges per se in the US, also reducing emissions and to be net zero by 2050. So just adding the sustainability layer to already the way we design buildings and infrastructure.
And this might be subjective, but I'm interested. Is sustainability part of the risk register?
I mean, sustainability. I mean, in my career so far, like in the 10 years, if I could say so, sustainability used to be at the time like as an add-on. It used to be an add-on in starting when I started, but now it is very much part of the mainstream discussion, if I could say. And anyways, like the project leaders who have been managing those big projects, they are already dealing with some components of sustainability, right? Like if I design a building in New York or in California or anywhere in the US or anywhere in the world, if I could say so, whether I want it or not, I am dealing with some components of sustainability in terms of like extreme weather events, water availability, procurement issues, and like supply chain issues, supply chain logistics. So they all contribute to like sustainability driven outcomes in some shape or form. So yes, it is very much part of the risk assessment these days. If you consider big infrastructure projects, they are very much in the conversation now.
And I like you said that because I
Mhm.
hadn't really considered that. I thought, oh, it's part of the risk register because the customer wants X number of sustainable materials, resources, or outcomes. But I hadn't considered that, in fact, perhaps a natural disaster could
Yeah.
be considered there on the risk register. How do you tend to make or get sustainability to gel with other risks that might be more financial?
I think, I mean, to answer that question, it very much starts with like the bidding process itself. Like, because as an engineer, I can design, I can work on an infrastructure project, make it very much optimized in terms of designing and how technically feasible it could be, and how serviceable it could be. But given with the financial risks and the risk assessment which it involves, it is sustainability is also being part of the value assessment these days. Like how we, if we incorporate certain elements which we require to be more sustainable, I just keep using the term sustainable, whether it could be interpreted in terms of like resiliency or like reducing emissions, because they all fall under the broader umbrella of sustainability. Though climate resiliency and sustainability are very different. I just want to quote that. So, having said that, uh, I think now the financial decisions are about like as I was saying earlier, like engineers tend to design the best and the best possible way of making constructing a building. But we need to start thinking about like how can we move beyond the first cost, right? Like if we are saying like sometimes the misnomer is sustainability is costing way less money. Sustainability is costing more money. Some people think sustainability is free, but the reality is it lands somewhere in between. So we need to talk more about like the value it creates, like when we add that layer of sustainability to the projects and built environment, like how much the infrastructure which we are working on, it's gonna work for X more number of years if we add that layer of sustainability. How would the logistics, like the supply chain logistics, would be saving the money? So there are a lot of other components which also incorporate into come under the financial umbrella. And so my advice and my observation has been like when clients move beyond the first cost and they also think about like the value creation itself, then it gets integrated into the whole process of like the bidding and the project management very seamlessly.
And I think that's maybe one of the key pieces of interest because I think we spoke with Aurora about when to get involved with the project, and some security
Mhm.
leaders say, "Oh, it's already been decided." I wish I'd have gotten there at the ground level.
Yeah.
Um, but with sustainability, do you think that there could be a problem with the lowest bidder kind of dynamic where
Mhm.
perhaps sustainability could be part of the lowest bidder and then be forgotten about? How do you make it survive the procurement stage rather than getting it designed out for cost?
So again, to answer that, as I mentioned before, like sustainability comes if it's being considered as an add-on or like a more aspirational side, then it gets easily weeded out eventually because if because when you're looking for the lowest bidder, So they usually turn to like traditional ways of designing and constructing things. So if so to that point, if rather considering sustainability as an aspirational or like an ornament, if we start considering sustainability as a risk involved while also considering other factors, then it gets easily integrated into the whole system of bidding. And instead of just focusing on like who is the lowest bidder, because the lowest bid and the cheapest project are not always the same. Because if somebody is bidding, if you give the project to the lowest bidder, and sometimes what happens is like you end up with a lot of change orders. Like though we thought like we are going to save money at the start, because the wages, the hourly wages of the contractor and other things, the cost associated with that specific contractor was cheaper on the paper. But since the work was not that good, the quality was not that good, so we ended up doing a lot of change orders. So it starts getting more expensive. So to that point, like while we are in the bid process, we need to incorporate sustainability as a factor from the start. As you said in your question, like a lot of people think that, oh, now it's too late to incorporate sustainability, and now we do not have that kind of skill set or the expertise and things like that. So incorporating sustainability from the start, and that's the first point. Secondly, thinking about sustainability as a important component of the whole design processes rather than considering it as an ornament or like more on the aspirational side. And also focusing on the value creation, which it's gonna bring eventually. Because even though sustainability does not always cost more or is not always free, but if even if it's coming with a premium, it also creates a lot of value for the project itself, and it also while saving on emissions. So I think that if that answered your question
Yeah,
briefly.
and because in a way it is a straw poll question, and
Hmm.
um, one of the other kind of metrics that people talk about is the the carbon factor. Now, perhaps
Hmm.
in not every US state this is such a topic at the moment, but um, you know, if we are concerned about sustainability, let's say, um, and we say, oh, I love the idea of having hempcrete, but
Hmm.
I end up shipping it from London. We're
Yeah.
creating a fictitious scenario here, but
Yeah.
the transport emissions are kind of befitting the purpose. So,
Hmm.
how do we think about embodied carbon and local sourcing, and where do people maybe get this whole concept wrong?
So, first of all, like embodied carbon basically refers to like how we extract the material, how it gets transported to the manufacturer, how the steel members or the structural components get built, and how it eventually get transported again to the construction site, right? So it's not just the material itself, which comes in play while we considering embodied carbon. And secondly, there is again like a common theme these days. Like there is a universally one green material that fits everything, that fits everywhere, but that's not true because there is a lot of context to add while considering or for any specific material, like for hempcrete, as you mentioned. If I'm building something in New York City or in San Francisco, let's stay within the US. If I'm building something in New York City, and I think hempcrete is a desired material, right, for the project. But if I do not have any local manufacturers or there's no adequate supply chain around where my project site is. So if I'm sourcing the material from San Francisco or anywhere in North America or even from London, as you mentioned, that defeats the entire purpose because the transportation also emits emissions. So in terms of LCA, which is life cycle analyses, the three stages, which is from A1 to A3, the scope A1 to A3. So those scopes, A1, A2, and A3, those levels also consider the transportation factor, how it gets transported, how it gets manufactured. So it's not just considering the material is green enough, for the lack of word, which is part of the component, which is one of the factors, but it's not the only factor. While considering the right strategy to save on emissions. So for embodied carbon, one has to think about like, okay, the material is doing its job, but how it's being sourced, how it's going to get transported, what is the procurement and like the supply chain looks like in the near region, in the area, and other factors considering like how it's financially viable to bring something from far off or from like nearby regions. So uh, so again, the bottom line is the material is not just the factor. Like if I say like, oh, this is the greenest concrete ever, and let's just source it everywhere, so that's still going to defeat the purpose because okay, it is the greenest concrete, but there are like a lot of variables in the equation. If A is greenest, but B and C are not are not the greenest per se, so it's eventually gonna not lead into the whole process would not lead into the ideal least emitting processes. So
Yeah,
many
it
other
reminds
factors
me
to
of
consider.
hydrogen and its many colors. When I heard about the pink hydrogen, blue hydrogen, green hydrogen,
Yeah,
okay, well there's a debate going on.
there is a spectrum. Yeah,
There's a spectrum, and but it's all
yeah.
hydrogen. Um, Now, one of the things we were keen to do with the session just before was to sort of make financial sense or help
Mhm,
translate them into a cost. Um, Sustainability carries this idea that it costs more. Um,
mhm.
perhaps it does in some circumstances, and perhaps it doesn't in others.
Correct,
Um,
correct.
if you were to tell a client that you'd save
Mhm,
200 tons of carbon, it's arbitrary, but let's give it a number. Um,
mhm.
but it cost them an extra 20,000. Um, how do you either work out their priorities or persuade them or keep that sort of in there because it does have a financial trade-off.
Mhm. So as mentioned before, like when we are in conversation with a client, the conversation should also not just revolve around like the cost of adding sustainability. The conversation should also include the benefits and the value it creates, right? If it increases, if I'm adding certain elements of sustainability, some certain components, sustainable components in layman terms, if I could say so. And if it's increasing the serviceability, the life of the infrastructure, if it increases the resiliency of the infrastructure in terms of extreme weather conditions, if it increases the way we are designing, if it optimizes the design processes, the way from the traditional ways of designing. So those value creations should also be part of the conversation. It's not just like $20,000, 20,000 extra dollars. It's also the value it creates. If we are saving on those 20,000 now, and if there is a hurricane in down the line in 10 years, and then now you need to replace the entire structure or portions of it, that's going to cost more than $20,000 for sure. So so to the point is that like when we are talking to a client, the conversations are usually about like what value it creates or it's going to create, how much it's going to cost, and of course like you have to do the cost benefit analysis because the only way out is to discuss cost because the buck stops with them because they are paying us to design the building or the bridge or whatever the project might be.
Mm.
So yeah, so the decision should be cost plus the value it creates and how it's going to save down the line in 10 years, probably 50 years, because the decisions we make today in infrastructure, in built environment, that's the case. Like the the factors which we considered in designing those elements now may affect the life, the serviceability of that infrastructure, of that project down the line for 50 years or 100 years. So,
No, I like that perspective, and I'm just checking the
mhm,
questions and comments.
yeah.
One says board strategy slash charter aligned with investors who want that from where they invest, and that's perhaps another angle, which is not just for the PMO and for the risk register. It's where you're getting your finance
Correct.
and ease and cost of availability was another comment. Um, perhaps that's a consideration. You know,
Mhm,
uh, and so that brings us maybe to another point. Um, I do like to think of the future leader and the future
mhm,
balance in the world of security, for example, cybersecurity. The question I
correct.
like to always ask is, business and technical acumen balance.
Mhm,
Similarly, with the world of corporate security and FM. With this, do you think that the leader of the future, it won't just be enough to have like engineering skills. It won't be so easy to just say, right, engineer and then eventually boardroom. There's gonna be
Mhm.
a business acumen in the middle, maybe with sustainability.
For sure, yeah. I mean, engineers don't need to stop being engineers. They just need to find better ways of translating what they think is technically optimal and how that amplifies and how that aligns with the business side of things. Because boardrooms and executives, they care more about like whether it's going to be affordable, whether it's going to make money down the line, whether it's going to be creating some value eventually. I mean, as you read one of the comments, like there are a lot of people interested these days in impact investing. That's another field where people are more concerned about like whether the project which they're putting their money in, is it going to create some impact? Like beyond the financial gains, is there a component where it creates a positive impact? So as an engineer, I we are designed to think like how whether some things are technically optimal or not. So for the future leader to be, they need to understand, they always need to have like the technical acumen, because the one of the best leaders whom I have worked with, they all have been like technically sound because they know what the deal is, they know what the project is about, and building off that, they need to translate all those decisions and thought processes into the boardroom to get the dollars, right? If you're not able to translate what you think, I mean, there is a bridge, right? For an example, there is a bridge, and as an engineer, I'm designed to make that bridge most efficient and how it can help people transport from A to B. But there are other components of it, like how it's going to create more employment in the area, how it's going to connect to certain communities and neighborhoods. So all those components need to be translated in the boardroom, like how it can affect in helping the economy or boom in the economy of the neighborhood. So all those decisions, how it affects societally, right? That is ESG, the S of ESG.
Mm,
So
mm,
how it affects all of that. So as a future leader, one has to understand both sides of it so that it gets the top dollar while also considering like whether it's going to be technically feasible to build it and it's going to withstand the extreme weather events down the line 20, 50, 100 years, while also creating a positive impact in the society in the neighborhood. So
yeah, which um, I think is key, and it's a more well-rounded leader. Um, but you mentioned ESG, and some people are
mhm,
they have big opinions on acronyms. But like if we don't get hung up on acronyms per se,
mhm,
do you, do you, do you think that maybe one of the things that the leader of the future needs to do is to spot where greenwashing is occurring and saying, aha,
mhm.
well, first of all, this is greenwashing. Second of all, it looks like greenwashing, and investors and the project management will see it too. Like, do you think that that could be one of their roles?
I think greenwashing is basically, I think investors, stakeholders, like whoever is investing in sustainable projects, for the lack of a word, or projects which have like some ESG component attached to it, they always want measurable outcomes. So greenwashing becomes a problem when what the marketing narrative is, it doesn't align with the measurable outcomes. If I'm saying I'm saving so and so amount of carbon, and if I'm saving a fraction of it, then it becomes a problem, because me as an investor or as a stakeholder in that project, I would be worried about like where my money is going, or what kind of impact I bought the idea of a certain kind of impact that this project would be making, but it's not doing the anticipated value creation. So that's where the problem is. And in terms of greenwashing, there's a lots of it. There are multiple sources of doing that, and there are multiple people who are doing that. But again, there are certain ratings and systems like Moody's rating, and there are like other different forms of ratings and rankings which rank the projects according
Mm,
to what factors are they considering in terms of sustainability? What factors they are considering in terms of which is environment, the societal and the government regulations and things like that. So one has to consider all those factors and proof check all those factors before making any decision in terms of in terms of deciding whether the company is doing the greenwashing or not. Because just by changing logos during certain months of the year, or like during
Mm-mm-mm.
climate week in New York climate week, or San Francisco climate week, that doesn't mean they are sustainable. So we have to dig deeper and look for those kind of rankings and reports. And the annual reports, the sustainability reports, which come out like every year, annual reports, to see like what kind of impact they had and what kind of money they are trying to uh, collect from the market. I think I lost you, Shalom. Can you hear me okay?
I do apologize. I suddenly lost my own reception. But yes. So what's next on the horizon? What is coming up in terms of projects that you think could be kind of challenging? Perhaps the world of data centers, big projects
Correct.
that everyone's interested in.
Yeah. So, I mean, and as we were talking about the future leaders, so data centers, they create n number of opportunities in terms of like designing the building itself, designing and work opportunities, but they also come with a set of problems, right? Like, are they going to be resilient? Is there going to be like water availability enough to do the construction and to bring the data centers, cool down the data centers and things like that? And are they going to be resilient in the future? Are they going to be emitting enough? Are they going to be emitting carbon emission? Are they going to be emitting carbon, which is going to be detrimental for the planet? Or how are we going to reduce it? So those are one of the key challenges of data centers, and that is one of the biggest upcoming opportunity in terms of work as a structural engineer, if I could say so, and also funding opportunities. So I am trying to get to that intersection of how me as a structural engineer can help finance, and how I can understand the strategy side of data centers and the buildings in general in the built environment. So I'm going to be joining Berkeley for my MBA soon. So I'm just trying to study all those factors. Like, I know how to design a building, but I am still trying to get a grasp on like, okay, how do I get it funded? How can I make the proper impact? How to avoid greenwashing, as we were just talking about it. So, and other factors, and how to make data centers per se, because that's the upcoming subset in the built environment, like how we can make them more sustainable, because how we design today, it's going to affect the people who would be living down the line, the citizens of the world in 50 years. So we need to take care of a lot of factors in terms of designing and financing. So that's the
Yep.
new and upcoming opportunity, not just for me, for everybody, I guess.
And I guess they compete for resources. And
Correct.
even if you don't even want to think about the resources they compete for between you and me, they're also apparently competing for resources with oil and gas companies in Texas.
Correct.
I I didn't know, but apparently they're both talking to each other, saying, "Hang on, we both have energy-intensive industries here." So it's all to play for. By the way, whilst I was away, Mike in the chat said he could absolutely hear you, and yeah, just because I'm monitoring the two sessions. So what's next for you? You mentioned MBA. I mean, you're about to start it. So do you think that the super engineer of the future is one that
Mhm.
will follow your path as well?
I mean, everybody's journey is different, so I hope they do, but everybody's journey is very different. So, but as we spoke earlier about like the business acumen, so again, like I'm not saying like everybody has to get an MBA, but everybody needs to get a way to decipher like how the technical intelligence, the technical design decisions, how we make them, how we design buildings, and how it gets translated to get more funding, to get the people in the boardrooms to understand like why this matters, why sustainability matters. It's not just another like a good to have. It's part of the design processes now. So again, like adding to the point, like in the US, we used to have like maybe like two hurricanes in a year, hardly, or maybe we do have wildfires in California, but it didn't used to have that scale as we experienced in LA like 2 years ago. So climate events are being amplified. So we also need to be prepared for those kinds of challenges and how we can translate that into the boardrooms and to get more funding and get the approval and the nod built on those projects
And the different risk registers, which is
and
another one of
different
our
risk
goals.
registers.
And
Yeah,
another one of our goals is to at least reveal the different risk registers to each other. We're not saying
correct.
that they could become the same, but at least show people where they all are. Um,
Yeah, exactly. Because all the engineering decisions, they all come back to risk resilience finance and how the supply chains work. Because it's not just me designing the building on my computer or on the sheet. It eventually comes down to how it's getting built, which is being affected how we are procuring the material, which is being affected how the transportation works. So it's a long chain of outcomes.
I like it. And I'm actually doing an in-person event in the States later in the year on
Nice.
supply chain on that very topic. So I'll be sure to weave that in. But Pratik, thanks very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you. I know it's a bit of a
Likewise.
different format, but this is what I'm trying to do: spice it up and cross-pollinate the
Mhm.
genres.
Oh, thank you for having me, and I appreciate your efforts in creating more awareness about sustainability, especially in the built environment. Thank you for having me.
Well, a big virtual round of applause, and I will put you back in the audience. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
And so, yes, we are exceptionally pleased to continue this series of events. This week, it is all about the West Coast. So tomorrow, coming up, it is about a specific type of risk, the world of cybersecurity. And then on Thursday, we expanded a little bit, also West Coast focus, to look at the world of third-party risk management and third-party partners, because in as far as we like to include those leadership questions, perhaps the leader of the future is a very confident one that has some buddies, some friends that can help them out. For example, consultants, or perhaps VCSOs or MSSPs or third-party FM. But at least we're acknowledging that that leader is confident, is absolutely fine as they are, but all leaders might need sector-specific knowledge as well, which is really what we'll try and cover on Thursday. But yes, have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much, and I will see you tomorrow.